everyone, welcome back to another episode of All in the Name of Growth. I'm excited to be here today with our special guest, Pamela Covington. She is an author and a speaker and also a life transition coach. And I'm really excited for her to get on and share her wisdom. The topic we're going to be covering today is really all about overcoming adversity, and she has definitely had her fair share to overcome. So I'm excited to be able to jump into that and talk about that. But before we do that, Pamela, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today, Christy. I truly appreciate the opportunity. Anytime that I could share my energy experiences to help other people just get a boost or feel motivated or energy. When I'm done, I usually like for people to go, "Whew, did you feel that?"
That's what we want.
That's my goal today.
I love it.
So just to share a little bit of my background, what brought me to all of this was I'm someone who once went from living a very comfortable middle-class lifestyle into deep poverty through no fault of my own. And during that time, I went through so much struggle. When I say deep poverty, that's the government definition of half of what poverty level is. On a good day, my children and I cooked grits and Vienna sausages on a kerosene heater. Prior to that circumstance, we were living quite well. We lived in downtown Savannah in a fully refurbished, beautiful Victorian home that overlooked this huge park called, I forgot the name of the park, but it's a beautiful park, and it's in the center of Savannah. And so when I went from that to barely existing, I learned some survival things, and they basically all came down to me, because truly, when it all is said and done, and you're dealing with adversity, it comes down to you and you. So I could not feel that because I lost my financial security and my home and eating the best foods and everything, that was all that I ever was, and give up. I had two children at the time, two boys. One was 9, my baby was 1.5. And I kind of used them as my anchor, because I knew that whatever happened to them from that point on was going to be determined by me. And the other part of my going into that situation is I left the greatest, most sensitive, fun man I ever loved. Problem being, before we had met, he had been to Vietnam, and so he suffered with post-traumatic stress disorder. And on his good days, he was everything to me and the kids. He was really proud to provide for us, and always made that his priority. And we had fun. We'd go fishing. We'd do all kind of things. But it was kind of a Dr. and Jekyll, Mr. Hyde situation. And so finally, I had to, you talk about tough. I had to make that choice. I'm like, but I love him so much, and he's been really good to me. But on his bad days, he was so scary that, and I had to think about my boys, even if I was willing to subject myself to that. So I made the choice to just kind of sneak and pick up and leave. And I even felt bad sneaking, because, you know, he couldn't help what he was doing, but I couldn't get him to go get any help.
Yeah.
And so the children and I left our wonderful environment in Savannah, Georgia, and I left and went 4 hours away. I needed to put some distance between myself and the children's dad. And I ended up homeless briefly. And I'm talking washing my baby in the sink at McDonald's bathroom, just getting turned down from the YWCA, because somebody told me, oh, you could go there. They have sheltering for women and children. But we got turned away because my oldest son was 9, and the opposite sex could not be older than 6 years old. So we ended up staying with a woman who had a small trailer in her backyard. And as I mentioned in the book, she appeared as an angel to me. Someone had told me about her, and I took her information. And that night that we got refused from the Y, we went over there. Because before we did that, we were frittering away what little money I managed to take with me on hotels and eating out and all of that. And I had to have diapers. You can imagine.
Yeah.
And so we stayed with her. And then I worked with an organization called the Urban League. They had a housing specialist. And for 5 days, this guy was literally begging these rental offices and explaining my situation through no fault of my own. And he was getting the worst of responses until finally he got somebody to say, okay, it took him 6 days of phone calls. And we ended up in this tenement, which was essentially a big U-shaped cement slab next to the railroad tracks at a dead-end street with one window in the front, one window in the back, and no air conditioning, mind you, in Florida.
Oh,
And our
no.
bedrooms were upstairs. So we suffered through that until I was told that there was a subsidized housing called Section 8. Most people know it, and it has some stigmas attached to it, which is another reason why I talk and speak to do the things I do. Well, that was a big difference for me and my children, because in the other place, the cement vault we lived in, there was no kitchen appliances either. And since we were getting food stamps, the cardinal rule for the SNAP program is you can only buy foods that you can do what with?
Cook it.
Take home and cook.
Yeah.
So every day I was walking to the store buying whatever we're going to have for dinner and lunch that day. And so when we got the Section 8 apartment, it had appliances in it. I could go over to the wall and flip something called a thermostat again and feel cool moisture on my skin. And from there, I would go to school, and one thing after the other, totally unplanned, I disciplined myself and I did the following things that I'm going to talk about briefly today. And that is, what kind of tools did I have? What were my discoveries when I had no choice but to overcome this adversity? Because you see, I wouldn't have my children think that that was normal.
Yeah.
And that was very important to me.
Yeah.
And had I not, I might have began a second generation of poverty. But I just kept scratching and scratching at the dirt until I could get something to rise up.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. So
So
before you get into your
mhm.
your three tools that you want to share, I just wanted to take a minute and to just kind of shine a light on a couple of the things that you had said in there. I'm like over here like writing notes down, and one of the things that I think was really unique about your situation and what you did, and what I want other people to recognize, is that a lot of times when we come up against adversity in our lives, the thing that we need to remember to do, aside from having our own back, right? Aside from believing in ourselves and that that we are equipped and capable of being able to change our circumstances, it comes in the form of being able to pivot, that we're able to see what was and recognize, well, that's no longer what it is, and I need to be able to do something else. And, through COVID, I feel like a lot of people were able to do that really well, that they were able to pivot their business. I know that, we live here in Utah, and there was an alcohol manufacturer up in Salt Lake. And during the pandemic, they stopped producing liquor to drink and they started producing hand sanitizer.
Oh, bless them.
Right, like that's a pivot. And
Yes, yes.
I want to draw people's attention to that you can take the skills and your abilities and the things that God has given you and that you possess, and do something else with them. And I know it's not an easy transition, and I'm not saying that it is, but there is an opportunity in there to take what you have and do something else with it. And I love that was one of the things that you talked about, that you had to pivot, and also touching on that sometimes comfort is the enemy of progress. Not sometimes,
Oh,
all times comfort is the enemy of progress. And being in a nice home, and on the good days, like you say, it was really comfortable, and on the bad days it wasn't very comfortable, but you were willing to put the needs of your children and your needs long term. You were willing to take that step back into the unknown, back into the dark, and being willing to start over. And I just, it's so commendable, because I think that a lot of people stay in the situation, whether that's their job or their relationship, or whatever the circumstances are that they find themselves in. Maybe it's in an addiction or whatever, they just stay because it's comfortable, it's what they know, and they're afraid to take that step back into the dark and to find a new path, right, to be
you're
able to
so right.
into a new place. And I love that you are willing to come forth and share that story because it gives other people permission, but it also helps people to say, if she can do it, so can I, right? That it gives people that a little bit of encouragement that they need to say, okay, I can no longer tolerate this work environment, or I can no longer tolerate my living environment. I can no longer tolerate my relationship, or, whatever that is. I would no longer will tolerate my own behavior that has gotten me into this situation, whatever that is. It's going to be different for everybody.
Yes.
But I love that you brought that forth and you're shining the light on it and showing people that sometimes the best choice is also the hardest choice. Oftentimes the best choice is the hardest choice, right? It's like, I don't know why it has to be that way, but it is just kind of a fact of life. And I love that you are shining a light on that. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. Okay, so now one of the things that I love is being able to give people tools. How can you actually do it? Rather, we talk about pivoting and we talk about, having your own back and all of those things and taking that step back into the dark. But you had talked about, that you had like 3 tools that really helped you be able to get from where you were to where you are. So I would love for you to dive into that.
Yes. Actually, I have 3, and then I got a bonus one.
All right.
Uh, the first one is prioritizing. In order to, you have to be willing to do today what you need to do with a vision of the future. And to do that, you have to prioritize what comes first. When you're living in a circumstance like that, or maybe faced with some other form of adversity, you have to make a lot of choices. And it is not about instant gratification. You have to do what's best today for the long haul. And again, that's a matter of prioritizing. And then the second one is resourcefulness. You have to use every resource, search resources out. Opportunity does not knock on your door. You have to go out and find it. They're out there, but I'm a believer that if you do good with what you have, the universe will help you get more.
I
So
love
being resourceful, prioritizing, being resourceful. The third tool I call exposure. And when you hear the rest of my story, you'll know why I pushed that one. And by exposure, I mean willing to step out of that comfort zone you spoke of, Christy. You're absolutely right on that one. And expose yourself to unlimited possibilities. And what I would ask people to think about is, if the only things that we could see happening to ourselves are those things that our limited, tiny human minds can conceive of, that's not very much. So what would you rather have by willing to expose yourself to the unknown? Would you rather only have your situation resolved by this little teeny limited thinking that you are basing only on things that have happened in the past, or you're having anxiety about in the future? And that's no way to go. And so you open yourself to unlimited possibilities. Because guess what? When you get beyond our tiny little boxed in, labeled, categorized human thinking, you're opening yourself up to things that you could never have imagined happen to you. But you have to be willing to expose yourself. I'm like this. One of my personal mantras is, if I find myself in a situation and I can honestly say that I have done everything that I possibly can, tried everything, every channel, every resolution, and it didn't work, I'd rather roll the dice with the unknown, because I have exhausted the known.
Oh,
So
that's
that's
so wise.
prioritizing, being resourceful, and being willing to expose yourself to unlimited possibilities. But wait, there's more. Letter S. So we got PRES, press on. Letter S is for those who are single moms or single dads. And that is, no matter that situation, okay, even though my children and I are groveling, I'm talking stealing toilet paper from McDonald's. Even though you have maybe have this overcoming, or have financial ruin, or any of those type of things occurred, it is so important that you prioritize and make sculpting your children's view of the world as best and open and varied as possible. I told my children, who have a respect for what mom's history has been and what she's done, that it is important that you know how to survive and love and handle situations and give yourself to people everywhere from the penthouse to the ghetto and every point in between.
Yeah.
And a person who can do that has unwieldy skills. I mean, just
Yeah.
covering all bases and being ready for everything. Always be prepared, right?
Right.
So
Right.
sculpt your children's view of the world. And the way you can do that is by what you choose to expose them to. I made sure my children went to live plays. We go to cultural festivals like the Greek festival. When I was coming up, born and raised in Pittsburgh, there was a lot of Polish community, and we would go to their festivals and eat the wonderful food and the sweets, and it was just, because diversity really is the spice of life.
It is. It is.
So sculpt your children the most positive, expanded view of the world so that when they grow up, they too can press on, push forward, and have an appreciation for everything that is good.
Yeah. You know what I especially appreciate about the sculpting aspect of it and what you're talking about. And yes, we can do that for our children, but I think that enough adults don't do that for themselves. That they don't and here's why. So my family, we love to travel. We love to be able to go to new places. One of my favorite places that we ever went to was Savannah, Georgia. Like it's so, so different than Utah. So different.
So
And
you've probably saw that park that I lived across the street. It's called Forsyth Park. That's the name of
there
that
you
park.
go. I just loved being able to get out and have that exposure to other people and cultures and religions and lifestyles and everything in between. Like I study different cultures, and I love, Asian culture, and I love watching movies that are made from other countries or that are about other countries. I mean, we watched a movie, it was incredible last night, that was based in Africa, and I just love that. And my thing is that so many people, they box themselves in, and their box gets smaller and smaller and smaller, like what you were talking about with like our small brain of experiences, basically, because we're not exposing ourselves to enough things out there, that we're not allowing ourselves to grow and to create connections with people that are different than us, to allow understanding to happen. And I love that you teach your children that. And I mean, gosh, that is literally like the whole world needs that education in just that one thing of being able to sculpt yourself and to gain exposure to things that are different than you, so that your box stops shrinking and that it starts expanding, and it allows more beautiful people and more beautiful experiences and circumstances into your life. So there was a quote that you had talked about when we had done our pre-interview by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Can you
Oh,
tell us what
yes.
that is?
Oh, my favorite quote. In fact, I love reading all of his things, but my favorite quote from him is a reminder to us that what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us.
Yes,
That's my
absolutely.
absolute favorite quote.
So it's one of my favorite quotes too, and I think that it's so, so true, and obviously very key in what we're talking about today and what lies within us, because people can sit down. I one of my favorite quotes is, if you're going through hell, don't set up camp. Right. Well, and I think a lot of people do, that like they're like,
Yes.
oh, here I am, like let's start building our tent. But it's not a place to be. And the only thing that gets us out of that place is what lies within us, is recognizing that value that is within us and that ability to be able to keep going and to change our circumstances. So do you want to tell us like the rest of your story? Like what brought you now to this point where you're an author and a speaker and a coach?
Okay. Well, I wrote the book because I recently located to Atlanta from Georgia. I had lived in Virginia for about 22, 23 years. And when I got laid off from my last job of 13 years, my girlfriends were having a pity party for me. And I wasn't even sad about it, right? I might have had my moments every
Sure.
now and then, the financial security of it or whatever. But otherwise than that, I felt like a great weight was lifted off of my shoulders. And so one day they're at my house and we're talking and they're, oh, well, how are you going to do this? And what are you going to do about that? And blah, blah, blah. And I said, you know what? I got a little something stashed away. And otherwise than that, I'm not worried about it because you know what, ladies? That's nothing compared to what I've been through. And they asked me, well, what have you been through? Because you see, they didn't know my story of
No.
poverty. And so when I told them, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. Well, I actually had started writing the book before I took the job, but the job was a
Mm.
new technology. And I put my first 14 chapters away in a closet and locked it up and did not pick them back up until guess what? Until I got laid off from the job 13 years later.
Mm.
And so,
You know,
what would happen in a nutshell after we got out of the poverty situation and I had stable housing, I decided to go back to school. So I went to a community college that I had seen directly across the street from the Urban League office. And initially I was a little scared. Here we go with the fear thing again, right? And by the way, fear is false evidence appearing real. And you have two choices. You could either face everything and rise or fear everything and run. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go to school. Well, then I'm being a little nervous. I'm like 29, 30 years old. I'm talking about going back to college. And so I had to overcome that. I didn't want anybody at school to know that I was a welfare mom because there's always this negative stigma
sure.
attached to that. I was worried about daycare and I found out, oh, there's a program called Title I that as long as I prove I'm in college full time, my baby could go to daycare for free. And I mean, every question I came up with why I couldn't do it, there was a woman who came up with an answer for everything. So I did it. And so I would finish my first 2 years at a community college. And during that time, my professor says to me one day when I came into class, Pamela, please come and see me after class. Well, I had been going through so much turmoil with my domestic situation. I hadn't moved into the Section 8 yet. It took me a year and a half to get in there.
Mm.
And I knew that I said, oh boy, my last paper I turned in must have been really bad. Well, quite the contrary. When I got there, his name was Ron. He always told us just call him Ron. He says, Pamela, this is really good. He says, it's got a weak spot here and there, but I'm going to be honest with you. You could turn words into dollars.
Oh,
Now here I
I'm
am living in
confused.
a Section 8 apartment, and me and my children are doing a little better, but it's far cry from what I'm used to living. And this person just told little old welfare me that my ability to instantaneously think of a word and express it is something to be valued. It's a gift.
Mm.
And wouldn't you know that he would be my mentor throughout the program. And one day he had talked to me about taking an internship. So I took an unpaid internship at a glossy city magazine called Jacksonville Today, real pretty magazine printed on nice shiny paper and ads. And for back then, the average reader was probably making $75,000, $80,000. And in the 85, 86, that was bankrolling, right? And so I'm there doing an internship, and the editor comes over to me in the room I'm sitting in and says, I just got a call. And it was a newspaper, and they want somebody to go and cover a story for them. And we're on deadline. Nobody can do it. And I'm like, why don't you take it? She says. And I'm like, oh, I'm scared to death because
Sure.
in 1986, which is what year that was, you could count on one hand the number of Black journalists, first of all, in
Mm.
1986. I don't have any press credentials. I'm driving this old hoopty beat up Monte Carlo, and I'm going somewhere and try to impress someone that I'm here to cover a story for a newspaper. So I went in the bathroom and had a quick talk with myself. Ron would be really disappointed if you didn't take that opportunity. And there you go with that fear of the unknown thing. Now, you don't like the situations that you've been living in, and here's something you don't never know. Well, you know what that newspaper was, Christy? It turned out to be a brand new national newspaper called USA Today.
No way.
So here I am on welfare now, got the story done, and worried that what if my caseworkers see my byline? I said, well, they're not going to think it's me. They'll just say it's just another welfare mom. And that next morning, the same paper machine that I used to walk past every day going to class right there by the door before you go into the college building, I took a couple of quarters that I saved from my food stamp change because that was the only cash that ever passed through my hands, and pulled that newspaper out and almost tore it apart looking for my name, and there it was. So you
Wow.
see, I have to say, and you see what that is. Did I not tell you that you have to be willing to expose yourself to unlimited possibilities? Because the first piece I ever had published, and I've had maybe 200 articles published in my lifetime, the very first piece happened while I was on welfare.
I love
But
that.
if I would have been biting my nails and saying, oh, I can't go, and I was worried that I'm going to this town and would people really accept me for my being Black,
Sure.
to be
Sure.
frank.
Yeah.
And it all worked out, and Ron was so proud. I ran with the newspaper like a child coming home with something they made in school. Ron, look, look. And since I had written in a national newspaper, I had no problem going to the local newspapers,
Right.
and that's how I ended up doing newspapers.
Isn't that amazing? I love what you had said earlier about how when you set your mind on something, the universe just has a way of bringing it about for you. But you got to get out there. You got to get out there and
Yes.
expose yourself and be willing to put yourself on the line to make that happen. What an incredible opportunity. One of the things though, listening to you talk about your story and your excitement just for life and the choices when you were talking about, I'd rather roll the dice on the unknown. This phrase kind of came up to me is that, it's a mentality of looking at life as if it's an adventure. And yeah, sure, there are setbacks, right? There are times when it's really hard and you're not really sure what step to take next. But if you look at each thing along the way of, well, this is just an adventure, and there's a way to figure this out. I just need to, like this has actually been a scenario recently that's been playing out in my own life. I told my husband the other day, I was like, I feel like I'm stuck in an escape room and I can't figure out the one last clue, right? It's like I just need that one last thing. And I was talking to my mom yesterday and, kind of rattling off to her things, and I said this one thing and she's like, oh my gosh, I think that might be your last clue, because I had told her the same analogy. But it's just that getting out there and continuing to try, continuing to expose yourself, continuing to, not just expose yourself outwardly, but also expose yourself inwardly, right? Like that you're gaining information, but you're also putting yourself out there for other people to see who you are. And I love that you said that you were driving this old beater Monte Carlo, and it reminded me of back to that Ralph Waldo Emerson. I mean, yeah, we're talking about it's not what's behind us or what's in front of us, it's what is within us, but also it's not what's without us. It isn't our car we're driving. That doesn't play an impact on what's happening on the inside of us or our quality or our abilities or what we can bring to the world, what we possess as an individual. And I loved drawing that kind of parallel between the two of them. So is there anything, I am going to have you share your quote that is by you at the end, but is there anything else that you would like to share before we kind of get to that point?
No, but given what I've shared today, I just would like everyone to again just kind of take a perspective and again that and I've had multiple instances. I love Carl Jung and synchronicity, right? And if that wasn't one, I don't know what is. And it just happened that the day that came out, the editorial cartoon was of a woman, it was drawn in black and white, and it was of a mother with two children at her hands, and she's climbing up these steps that have all these words related to the welfare system on it. They just so happened. So it's just like total irony. But you see, again, I could not have known any way that that would ever happen. I'm working an internship that doesn't pay. I'm on welfare, so I would have rather been paid. So I didn't let that stop me. I'm scared to death because I've never done anything like that when the editor came up to me. And then I thought about, oh my goodness, I'm going up there and I don't have any credentials. They're not going to believe Jack. Well, I actually found, I used my mind. When I calmed down, that's when you make your best decisions. That's another reason why you can't go into a situation fearful,
Yeah.
because if you do, you don't have the clarity of mind to help yourself figure things out. So once I got there, I'm like, that wasn't a bad drive. And then, yeah, I got this. And see, we didn't have computers back then. I actually had to write out everything. So the first gentleman, I said, well, who in this town? The story was about the impact that President Reagan's budget plan for the Trident submarines coming to that area called St. Mary's, Georgia. And they wanted to know from citizens in that area what they thought the impact was going to be. Well,
Mhm.
first of all, there you go. I didn't know anything about submarines, right?
Sure.
So I says, well, when I got up there, I'm going to pick that realty office right there, because who would know better what an impact of the situation would be than somebody who's selling and buying, selling homes.
Yeah.
Well, that gentleman was so cordial to me that I felt bad for even expecting to be treated any other way. He offered me a nice ice cold Coca-Cola, and I'm from up north where Pepsi reigns. So, I'm getting used to all of these things, and told me that when I got done with my interviewing, that I was welcome to come back to his office and use his phone to transcribe it, which is what we did back in those days.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
so
you see,
nice.
and so sometimes, like your situation, Christy, it's not how things are going to happen is not up to us.
Mhm.
What we put into it, that's the part. Are you being disciplined? Are you being resourceful? Are you prioritizing? Are you exposing yourself to unlimited possibilities? That's the part that we have to do. If we do that, then how it will come about will amaze you.
I love that how it turns out is not really up to us, but it's really what's within us and the way we're putting ourselves out there. That's really what's up to us. I love that. That was a great.
It's so true. I've had it happen recently in my life, and I'm like, I've got sense enough now to recognize these things and to tap into them. Whereas when I was young, I kind of, played them off sometimes, but
Sure.
now, no, I count on it. I count on it.
Yeah, I love that. I'm a huge proponent of personal responsibility. I'm a huge proponent of it. So many people point the finger outward and they never take responsibility for what's happening on the inside. And I just your whole story is just like embodies personal responsibility and of being the responsible mom in the situation that could have been dangerous for your kids, and just continuing to put one foot in front of the other and trying to find the solution, find the solution, find the solution, find the answer, find whatever it was that, make the phone calls. And that's one of the things, it's such a good reminder actually for me, because I'm at a point in my business where it's like, you don't want to make the phone calls, right? Because they can be really uncomfortable, but it's usually having those conversations with other people that is where the magic happens, because sometimes the answers aren't for you to find in yourself, they're for you to find in someone else.
Yeah.
And it's that outer information that you don't have that you need to gain, that it requires those conversations. It requires putting yourself out there in order to find, the investors, or find the job, or find out that section 18 exists, or, like any of those kinds of things.
Mhm.
I don't know. I just feel like there's a great opportunity to be had in first understanding your own responsibility over your own life, and then recognizing that you don't have all the answers, and that it does take that exposure to be able to find those answers.
Yes,
Um,
and that we do have the wherewithal. We all have something that we can value. And I like to remind people that you're already an odds beater by the fact that you're here. Do you
right?
realize that it took the combination of 250 million sperm cells, one of them made it, versus 10,000 female eggs, 250 million to 10,000 female eggs to make this one person who has no DNA like yours now. So that is proof positive that you already beat the odds just by being here. So you are
Yeah.
naturally an odds beater.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the other aspect of it is that every life circumstance, it can either be what is happening to us or it can be what is happening for us. There's a distinguishing line in life where we can look at our life and say, oh my gosh, all these things are happening to me, instead of saying, oh my gosh, all of these things are happening for me and it's going to be amazing, right? Like there's an opportunity for a different perspective on our life. And I just think, like I said, you embody that so
And when
well.
I get to that point, I'm like, what is it that I'm supposed to be learning here?
Sure. Amen. Amen. That's what I'm saying. That's what I've been going through. So, okay, what I want you to share your quote from you.
Okay, my Pamela M. Covington quote is, the shape of your life depends on whether you choose to be the sculptor or the clay. I don't know about you, but I prefer to sculpt.
Amen. I love that. That was a great ending point. Okay, Pamela, where can people find you online?
I have a website that is Pamela, middle initial M like in Mary, Covington, COVINGTON.com. And the name of my book that tells my entire story from living great to barely eking out a living is called A Day at the Fair. That's spelled F-A-R-E, like in welfare, One Woman's Welfare Passage, and it's on Amazon.
Awesome. And I will make sure that all of those are also in the YouTube description and the notes for the podcast. So Pamela, thank you. I just admire so much everything that you have overcome in your life and the way that you have chosen to take that overcoming and you show up for other people, and that you're
Oh,
here
yes.
to empower others and to help them bypass the fear and to recognize that they have an ability within themselves to do something greater than they ever imagined. And I just applaud what you're doing. I think it's great.
Thank you for having me today, Christy, because it means so much to me that now that I've gone through all these traumas and everything in my life, that was why I decided to become a life transition coach, so that I could guide women in particular through unplanned, unpleasant, major circumstances, get them through it and beyond it.
I
And
love it.
and I basically are dedicating the remainder of my life to my advocacy work and to helping women.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that. Thank you, Pamela. We will catch up with you later.
All right. Thank you so much, Christy. Bye-bye.